You are listening to the voice of the frontline protector here at the Private Officer Beat Radio. Every week you'll hear breaking news, topics of training, information for the industry of security, public safety, and law enforcement. So strap in, hang on, we're about to speed off in this episode of the Private Officer Beat Radio. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this live edition, once again, of the Private Officer Beat Radio, a production of Private Officer International and Blue Ram Media. And again today, on this, the 16th day of May, I am your host, founder and CEO of Private Officer International and other organizations, Rick McCann. Now, sadly, at the top of this hour, we are receiving word of 5 security officers that have been murdered in the last 4 days, including a retired police officer shot and killed, among 10 others murdered, gunned down in the middle of a Saturday afternoon grocery shopping in Buffalo, New York. It is a sad, sad day in our country, in our world, when people cannot go out and do simple grocery shopping or pick up their children from school or be at a theater or just out walking. This biased shooting, the Sheriff Department have announced that this was racially motivated, that out of 13 people shot, 10 were African American, and that the shooter, a white male, targeted the store, even drove several hours to the store for no other reason but to gun down these persons who were doing nothing to nobody but grocery shopping. And we cannot stand for this, and we cannot tolerate this type of violence that is happening nationwide. Now, I am very disturbed to say that the security officer who was gunned down had recently retired as a police officer. Aaron Salter retired recently from the Buffalo Police Department. Now, he did get some rounds off, and he did hit the shooter, whose name I'm not even going to mention because he doesn't matter. But unfortunately, the gunman, too, was wearing body armor. And he then was able to advance on the security officer and shoot and kill him. Police responding to the calls of an active shooter were able to capture that gunman without any further shots being fired. And today we'll also be talking about a 22-year-old gunned down in his vehicle while on duty in Portland, and 3 others killed in the line of duty. So much to talk about on this edition of the Private Officer Beat Radio. We always have a lot of things going on. Sadly, sometimes it's just disturbing to come on the air and bring all of the bad news. But hopefully, in doing so, we can awaken those working in the profession to understand the dangers that are all around. I've recently seen a video posted on social media about a security officer sleeping. And I hate to say it's nothing new, but it's not. But he had a firearm. And he was sitting in a public place. And he had one of the worst holsters, a little thing snapped over, nylon type holster. Anyone could have come by and taken that gun and taken his life. People, wake up, literally. Understand the dangers that are out there. As of right now, we have 35 or 36 security officers murdered in 2022. And we're not even halfway through the year. We're not even halfway through the year. I don't know really what to say to convince private security and private law enforcement to really wake up and understand what their job and what their dangers and what their threats really are, because we're not doing it. And it's really, really sad. Right now, Officer Down memorial page, it lists 19 police officers killed by gunfire. We have 35, 36 security officers, all murdered, most by gunfire. And every year, the number of security officers killed by gunfire are more than double, and sometimes even triple the number of law enforcement killed by gunfire. And yet, we just kind of shake it off like no big deal. Hey, whatever. Most of our private security and private law enforcement die at the hands of others by gunfire. And it's really, really tragic. When we come back from our first break today, we're going to talk about the other officers killed in the line of duty. And we're putting together a video of the first quarter of this year that'll show the incidents involving the deaths of the security officers between January and April. And we'll try to do this every quarter so that you can see where these events, murders, happen and how they happen. We've been in business here at Private Officer International for a long time. When I come back, we'll talk about that for a minute. But our sole purpose on the air, on the internet, our sole purpose isn't memberships, although we need a few more thousand. But our sole purpose is to give the people on the front line information, training, knowledge, and things that would help them to live longer. Things that would help them to be prepared for that day when that storm's coming, because it is coming. The environment that we live in, when you put a uniform and a badge on, there's just no way to escape the wrath that could come your way. And anyone who's been in this field for any length of time probably can tell you they've been assaulted more times than they can remember. You're listening to the Private Officer Beat Radio. We're going to be right back. Like I said, we've got a lot of things to talk about.
There was the explosion, and I remember just opening my eyes, and I got both of my legs. I had surgery after surgery, and what's going to happen next? The Wounded Warrior Project said, look, brother, everything's going to be okay. 3 months from now, 4 months from now, a year from now, you'll be fine. I don't know if I would be as well adjusted as I am now if it wasn't for them.
To learn more, call 1-877-832-6997 or visit woundedwarriorproject.org.
Armor College is excited to announce our brand new Public Safety Dispatcher program. This 18-week program will get you ready to take the required exam to become a telecommunicator for police, fire, or EMS. Check out the brand new program at armorcollege.org. Start your new career today.
911 receivers, emergency.
911 telecommunicators are often the unseen heroes of public safety. The public safety cycle starts with the 911 telecommunicator. So when somebody dials 911, the 911 telecommunicator is receiving information, getting help dispatched to the correct place, and then providing potentially life-saving advice until the paramedics, the police, or the firefighters arrive.
My name is Stephanie Venturelli. I'm a 911 telecommunicator. We answer 911 calls throughout the community and dispatch the police and fire department for where they need to go. Well, I knew I wanted to do something in the public safety field. I wanted to help people, but I didn't necessarily want to run into fires or be fighting criminals. So I focused on the emergency management field and then found my way into dispatching, which is really fits perfectly. I'm helping people on the phone, helping the fire department, the police departments, and getting everyone where they need to go and to help everyone around the community. Every day you come in, you're assigned to a position. Sometimes it's a fire dispatch position, other days it's a police position, or you're just a call taker. So if you're on the call taker side of things, you're just answering 911 calls. They're usually emergency and non-emergency calls, and that's your 8-hour shift or maybe 12 hours if you're working overtime. And if you're sitting at the police position, you're primarily getting police calls and dispatching the police officers and handling the radio traffic. And the fire side is pretty much the same. Fire is a mix of dispatching the fire department and also answering phone calls, so it's a bit more multitasking. So you never really know where you're going to be sitting. Whichever day you come in, you'll be at the position and assume that role for the day. I was on the emergency management path, and I stumbled upon the dispatching class, and they were hiring. So I'm like, oh, I'll go through the hiring process for the experience, and I ended up getting hired, getting the job, and I've been here ever since, and it worked with my life and everything, and it just worked out perfectly. There's a lot more to it than people think. You're answering the phone, talking on the radio, listening to the radio, all at the same time sometimes, and you have to be able to prioritize what needs to be done and who needs to go where. So it's not the easiest job. You're not just going to sit back and relax all day. You do have to pay attention and be focused and be able to concentrate on what you're doing. But with that being said, it's still a great job to have. You work with great people who are always there to lift you up if you had a bad day or you've taken a bad call. And it's a great career to be in.
From coast to coast, cops are cracking down on seatbelt violations. Buckle up day and night or expect a ticket. It doesn't matter who you are or where you live, they'll be on the lookout. Cops write tickets to save lives. Click it for ticket.
We're looking at the number of security officers murdered in the last couple of weeks, and I can't help but to think about this one in particular that occurred in Portland, Oregon. The murder, the ambush, of a 22-year-old security officer sitting in his vehicle. Police do not know if this was someone who knew him, someone who had a beef with him, if it was because he was wearing a uniform. 22-year-old Charles Mark Anthony Jones murdered, gunned down, doing his job. And this brought me back to another similar murder that happened a couple of years ago in Madison County, not too far from the capital of Mississippi, Jackson, Mississippi. An elderly security officer, 85-year-old David Heron, was on duty in his vehicle when he was shot multiple times. 85 years old, and police at that time said it appeared that, to them at least, that it was an execution, and now police in Portland are saying the same thing. It appears to be an execution-style murder. About 6 or 7 years ago in Roanoke, Virginia, another security officer was sitting in his vehicle and was gunned down execution style at an apartment complex. It is very, very dangerous these days to be in uniform, on duty, and alone. Being armed is not the end-all, be-all, but it will give you at least some advantage to being able to protect yourself. I really don't understand why over the last 5-6 years there's been a sudden increase. 5 security officers murdered just in the last 5 or 6 days. It just, I don't know. We can do the training, we can provide the equipment, we can preach about situational awareness and hope that it will save some lives, but I don't have an answer. I do believe that doubling up on most accounts, having at least 2 security officers, definitely will save lives. Coming out of Louisiana, I saw another very interesting situation, and we have sent out an alert over the weekend. This is coming out of Coshada, Louisiana. A security guard working at a juvenile detention facility, and I checked before we went on air this morning to make sure that this was not a detention officer or a deputy. This was a private security guard. The security company had a contract there. According to law enforcement, the detention officer assisted 3 juveniles with escaping from the detention center. 2 of them had been charged with attempted murder. 21-year-old security guard Victoria Toon was seen on video taking the 3 out of the detention center and driving them off in a vehicle. Now, we are happy to report that although they did escape, they were captured overnight in Houston, Texas, by the U.S. Marshals and the Fugitive Task Force of the Houston Police Department. They got information that they were heading toward Texas, down Interstate 10. Another tip came in that a vehicle that was seen on the video with the security guard and the three suspects was later spotted in the Houston metropolitan Harris County area, and they were able to track that on surveillance cameras throughout the area, and eventually they took the three in custody. Besides escape, the security guard now is facing felony charges as well, and things are not going to be looking good for her. We are also saddened and yet happy to report that a security officer who was beaten in the head in Honolulu, Hawaii, with a metal drink container, 58-year-old Michael Stubbs, passed away, but we are happy to report that quickly thereafter, police arrested a suspect in the murder. The security officer was on duty at the Pioneer Plaza at around 5:30 when he was hit in the head with a metal water bottle. I did a in-person training about 2 years ago. I tried to explain that just because the person is not armed with a gun doesn't mean that he can't kill you. We've seen security officers killed with skateboards. We've seen security officers killed with pen knives or very small pocket knives. We've seen security officers now killed with metal water containers. Very, very disturbing. We are very excited. We have been talking about this now for a number of months, but we are very excited as we get closer and closer to launching our streaming network. If you would like to have your podcast or YouTube show featured on our streaming network, we would be happy to work with you on that. Contact us at helpdesk@privateofficer.com. You can also begin brainstorming about a show of your own that you would like to have on the streaming network. We will work, our producers and team will work with you on that as well at Blue Ram Media. Contact us. Point of contact for now will be helpdesk@privateofficer.com. We do have just a lot of things going on. We're very excited about what the rest of 2022 really holds. And if you want to be involved, please contact us at helpdesk@privateofficer.com. We'll be right back.
What a fantastic day.
What a fantastic day.
The water's like glass.
The water is like glass.
Don't forget the soda.
Don't forget the life jackets.
Who wants the 8 and who wants the 15?
Who wants the inflatables?
What a great day.
To be on the water.
So glad you saw me go over.
That was so funny. When you went over and your life jacket inflated.
Never go out without a life jacket on again.
What a great day we had.
When it comes to wearing life jackets, make the right choice. You're in command. Boat responsibly. This message brought to you by the National Safe Boating Council and the U.S. Coast Guard.
Who knows what a child will grow up to be? It's one of the coolest things about kids. The unknown, the potential, the chance to do or become whatever they can imagine. But what if something happens during childhood that stops them from reaching that potential? Did you know that preventable injuries are the #1 killer of children in the United States? And around the world, 1 child dies from a preventable injury every 30 seconds. But the important thing to remember about preventable injuries is that they're preventable. We can do something to stop them. Things to make sure kids get the chance to be creative and play. The chance to take chances and explore. The chance to fall down and get back up. Help us give your kids, and every kid, the chance to grow up, reach their potential, and become whatever they can imagine. Learn how at safekids.org.
All right, welcome back to this edition of the Private Officer Beat Radio. A very interesting lawsuit coming out of Florida. A couple of years ago, we talked about the sudden collapse of a tower, residential tower. Many people were killed, 98 people total, others injured. A settlement a few days ago of $1 billion with over 10 different entities being involved. Now, one of the strange, and I'm very curious about this, companies that settled in this lawsuit for the biggest chunk of it, between 450 and 500 million, was Securitas. How did they play a part in the demise of the building and the death of the people? We do not know. Securitas USA, the security company that provided on-site security services and even had their own security personnel injured during the collapse, is going to settle their part of the lawsuit for almost $500 million. Now, Securitas was in charge of on-site guard services. They managed visitor access. They operated safety systems at this residential community, high-rise. But what did they do to assume liability? What did they do to assume any type of culpability? We're looking into this because there's something more that's going on that is not being disclosed, and we're definitely going to look at this and try and figure this out. Of course, I doubt that Securitas officials would comment, but we're going to try and contact someone there and maybe get some definite information about how a security company in this type of situation would be responsible. It just does not make sense. Over here at the news desk, in other news this week, 2 security officers have gone missing in different states. We're currently developing a docuseries about this very thing, and in talking to folks, interviewing folks for the documentary, they did not believe that security or law enforcement disappear. But they do. Coming out of Irvington, New Jersey this past week, a mother of a young New Jersey man is asking people to find her son. 26-year-old Samuel Cadino is a security guard, and he worked for the Postal Service as a security officer. The 26-year-old was beginning to act a little strange. Last week, his mother asked if everything was okay. He said, "Oh, I love you. I just want to protect everyone." And off to work he went, but he disappeared. Now, the mother told police that the son had told her that day he thought someone had put some type of drug into a drink the night before because he was feeling kind of funny, but he was going to go off to work anyways. And now he has disappeared. We know of at least a dozen security officers that have disappeared, and right now we know of 7 or 8 that are being reported missing just in the last year. And in this docuseries, we're tracking down whether or not they came back home or if they are still missing. A second security officer also missing, Robert Richardson. Police are looking for him after he left work and disappeared. Authorities, again, don't know if foul play is involved. They don't know if he just disappeared on his own. They don't know. Police are investigating this. This one is out of North Carolina. But it's suspicious. It really is. Whether or not these were just people that decided to disappear or if there's other circumstances involved, we don't know. A lawsuit has been filed and an arrest has been made in Oklahoma City. A security officer who worked at the Crush Foods grocery store has been charged with assault with a dangerous weapon after tasing a man he suspected of shoplifting at the grocery store, but police say the man did not shoplift. The man tried to leave the store and the security officer pummeled him and then tased him and assaulted him. We're seeing this more and more. Of course, we talk about the lack of training, but also it is also the quality of people. Sometimes they don't know what to do. Beaches, public pools, and other facilities are struggling to recruit lifeguards. We see this quite often. Memorial Day is considered the unofficial start of summer. Many people will be hitting the beaches, the public pools, even the pools at the YMCA. The city of Austin says they need 750 lifeguards to operate 34 of their facilities. Beaches along the Gulf Coast say that they are short at least 200 lifeguards, and even the YMCA says staffing is a struggle, and some pools will not be opening up. Now, in some states, the minimum age to be a lifeguard is just 15. In South Alabama, along the Gulf Coast, a large indoor water park is scheduled to open next month. Dozens of lifeguards needed there. And yet, even though there's millions of jobs that are open, people still are struggling to fill them. Houston police captured a casino robbery suspect. The robbery happened at the Alabama Coachella Tribal Casino in Louisiana, and for whatever reason, they proceeded west and were captured again in the Houston area of Texas. A man driving through the Carson City Chick-fil-A decided to really drive through and crashed into the building. He ran and hid inside a casino. Security there assisted law enforcement in apprehending him. A store security officer also injured. This happened in Birmingham, Alabama. We know that injuries to security personnel in the retail arena is increased. Very dangerous there as well. Philadelphia say they have 400 openings for 911 operators, crossing security people, crossing security officers, and they cannot fill those positions either. 3 Indianapolis persons have been charged in an armored truck robbery. Police say that they identified and arrested Devontae Foster, 28, as one of the main suspects, 31-year-old Lonnie McGill and 24-year-old Darius Moore, all charged with kidnapping, confinement, theft, armed robbery. A Winston-Salem man has been arrested after a shooting at a mall. There, security and law enforcement responded. Reginald Dwayne Gray, 26, was identified and charged in that shooting. Listen to this, folks. A woman decided in Fayetteville, Georgia, to bare all to the public and stood in the middle of the store, stripping down as she urinated on the floor, profanity-laced language, assaulting of employees. She's been charged with battery, public indecency, and disorderly conduct, and identified as April Barrow, 40. 20 people were injured during a shooting in Milwaukee this weekend after the Bucks-Celtics playoff game. This was one of 5 mass shootings that occurred over the weekend. Police said that it started near the nightclubs and restaurants. The Milwaukee police said at least 2 people are critical, including a 16-year-old girl. A second shooting in the same area left more people injured. Security at the Des Plaines, Illinois Rivers Casino spotted 2 small children left in a vehicle. There was no parent, no adult around. They checked the parking lot. They investigated and contacted law enforcement. The Chicago man, later identified as Esteban Morales, 38, of Chicago, left his 3-year-old and 5-year-old locked in a vehicle while he gambled inside. Security in Dearborn, Michigan assisted law enforcement in an arson at a fresh market using surveillance video. They were able to piece together information and the description of a vehicle leading to the arrest of a suspect. And it was 2 different arson attempts on this particular store. A nightclub in Maryland says an off-duty D.C. police officer threatened him by putting a gun to his throat and stomach. The man involved, Mohammed Saisi, the security officer, said that this police officer's girlfriend had been involved in some type of disturbance with another patron. When she was asked to leave, law enforcement says that's when the off-duty D.C. police officer grabbed the nightclub security officer and threatened him with a firearm. He's been arrested, and we're going to follow this case because this seems to be way over the top and something that just didn't need to happen, but that's what happens when people are fueled by alcohol. Security provider CSC, which provides security at many events across the country, is under the microscope after there were numerous incidents where there was active shooters, people lost their lives. CSC says that they provide unarmed, trained security personnel, but they are not responsible for providing armed policing or security. I remember at the Route 91 Harvest Festival that happened a number of years ago in Las Vegas, one of their employees, security officer Eric Silva, was killed during a mass shooting. Right now, there are multiple million-dollar lawsuits against CSC. Actually, a number of years ago, we questioned whether or not they were a security company or an event staffing company because they were not licensed in some states. They have now evidently become licensed in all regulatory states. Still, we will be following the developments on these lawsuits. There's a lot of breaking news. You can check it out anytime, day or night, at privateofficerbreakingnews.blogspot.com. 24/7, we put fresh news there. Go to our Twitter platform, twitter.com/private officer. You'll see even more breaking news. And, of course, join the conversation at facebook.com/private officer international. When I come back, we want to talk about a recent arrest, 4 hospital security officers charged with murder, and talk about where this all went wrong, where this all went very, very wrong, and why these things keep happening. You're listening to the Private Officer Beat Radio. Hey everyone, you're listening to the voice of the Frontline Protector right here on the Private Officer Radio Network. Now don't go away because we are coming right back when we've got a whole lot more right here on the Private Officer Beat Radio.
Life is precious. Ask any of these people. They've been given a second chance at life through organ and tissue donation. But there are more than 84,000 Americans waiting for life-saving transplants. 17 people die every day waiting. I didn't know this until I lost my best friend, Lyric. She gave the gift of life to 5 people. That's why I've become an organ donor, too. One decision saves so many lives. Donate life.
If you're not already receiving breaking news and our bi-weekly newsletter, Officer Down Reports, and discount training news in your personal or business email, then go to our website right now at privateofficer.org. privateofficer.org. A Dropbox will come down. Just fill out your info, and you'll be the first, one of the first, for sure, to know about what's happening in the security industry. You'll know when a security officer is killed. You'll also get these great discounts on training and equipment and so much more. privateofficer.org. And if you're not already a member of the Private Officer International Association, sign up while you're there today. Become a lifetime member for just $99, and we'll also include a free Private Officer International patch.
That's right. I'm dead. I got shot. I'm not supposed to be dead. I'm only 17. And now I can't see my 18th birthday because I'm a fatal victim of gun violence. My friends, my family, my own mother was devastated. Can't see her son anymore because of gun violence. And everyone's here at the funeral. But before they lay me to rest, there's just one last thing I have to do. How many more of us have to die from gun violence? Let's put a stop to this, because if we don't, the next time it could be your child lying in this casket.
Brought to you by Man Up Inc.
All right, welcome back to the Private Officer Beat Radio. I want to spend the rest of our time that we have on today's program talking about the recent arrest of 4 security officers at a hospital in Pueblo, Colorado. Anthony Byron, Randy Villapando, Anthony Ruff, and Drake Castro have all been charged with negligent homicide for the death of a patient, Matthew Haskell Jones. And this occurred last year, November the 17th, 2021. And in Colorado, negligent homicide is a felony. Now, the reason why I'm spending this time talking about this particular arrest is because of some statements that the security officers and staff at the hospital have made of their own free will that clearly identify some serious issues with what went on. First of all, in doing my research for this particular radio show, I did find out that Colorado does have a long-standing citizen or private person arrest statute. And in the statute, it allows for arrest of misdemeanors and felonies. I state this in the onset of this discussion because I want it to be clear that this could be a possible defense for them in their own defense. They could say that they were trying to make a citizen's arrest. Colorado has always been a state where it's still pretty much the wild, wild west, with the exception of maybe Denver and Colorado Springs and maybe the Boulder area, but they could clearly try to defend themselves with starting out by saying that this was all an arrest gone awry. So here's what happened. This is what we know from court records and police statements and investigations. There had been an altercation between a security officer and Matthew Jones, a patient. The hospital had released Jones, but he did not want to leave the hospital. And according to initial statements, that began kind of a physical altercation and a disturbance at the hospital, where he died a little over a week later. The El Paso, Colorado County Coroner's Office then ruled that Jones' death was a homicide. So he died from a brain injury due to cardiopulmonary arrest during a physical restraint and battle. Now, the other additive here is that the coroner said that he was morbid obese and that he had intoxication of methamphetamine and probably cocaine intoxication, which contributed to some degree to him having a cardio emergency, a cardiac arrest. In the 33-page arrest affidavit, however, investigators say that what really happened the morning of February 10th was that security told Jones that he'd been discharged from the emergency room against medical advice and that he needed to leave the property. They, security staff, negotiated with Jones. They even tried calling his wife and then his mother to come and get Jones, but for whatever reason, they did not or would not. The next step of the security staff was to call a taxi. So far, so good. They're trying to de-escalate any further situation. They're trying to get this patient who's been released because he wanted to be released from the hospital home or to the mother's or to some other safe place other than the hospital property. Now, security called a taxi, but he wouldn't get in and he wouldn't leave. When security again told him he had to leave the property, he became more violent. A nurse allowed Mr. Jones to use a phone, and then he ended up ripping the phone cord out of the wall. This escalated security's involvement, and they told him again to leave the property. Security officer Valpendendo was the person who had the most interaction with Mr. Jones. But here's where it all goes bad. It goes downhill from here. No place in the security officer statements or the 33-page investigation or in the press release, as a matter of fact, no place in the arrest affidavit did it say that security was trying to effect an arrest. Security officer Valpendendo, Vialpando, told police that he and other security officers then began attempting to move Jones from the hospital, quote, by force, unquote. The security officer said all 4 security guards at that point said Jones was resisting their attempts to force him to leave the hospital. And that's when police statements say that Jones fell to the ground. Now, this statement is damning, in my view, and may be problematic in a defense for the security officers, because it says here clearly, Jones, the patient who had been discharged, ripped the phone cord, and at that point, security officers, rather than detain him for police to press charges, they began, and this is in the words of the security officers in their statements, to physically, by force, try to remove Jones from the hospital property. We see this escalation by security personnel all of the time. Just this past year, 8 security officers in Nashville, Tennessee, were charged similarly with the same type of charges, homicide, after they chased and subdued an intoxicated male who was mildly causing a disturbance after he refused to leave a downtown nightclub / restaurant. They chased him. They all jumped on top of him. Face down he laid until he could breathe no more and died. A new law in Tennessee has just been passed because of this incident, which requires further training, and proprietary security had to register in Tennessee, but they did not have to be licensed nor go through any training, and that is about to all change. But elsewhere across the country, in the last 18 years that we've been doing this, we see all of the time where security officers escalated by putting their hands on people, and that is an assault or a battery in most states. You cannot physically, by force, remove a person from the business. You have two options as a private security officer. One, if your state allows it, or if you have a private police commission, you may arrest the person for trespassing at that point. You may detain a person if you have a statute in your state that allows a citizen to make a private person's arrest, and again, it would be for a misdemeanor, trespassing. Unfortunately, the other option, the option of use of force, is not an option at all unless you're being assaulted. You may use force to defend yourself, reasonable and minimal. We talk about this all the time. And private security officers and law enforcement often get this wrong. You can only use force to effect an arrest, defend yourself or another person. That's it. Not to remove someone from the property. In an interview with detective, security officer Valpendo told police that they did try to get Jones onto his stomach once he fell. On his stomach? What? You want him to stop breathing? Security officers told police that he then began spitting at them. Well, yeah, he's trying to defend himself. He's got 4 guys all over him, probably beating the heck out of him, getting control of him. And police then said, according to security officer Pando, Jones then became unresponsive. And security then provided medical aid and called 911 again. Police said that Jones lay there face down. The struggle was over. But for some reason, one of the security officers then secured his legs. Now here's a real problem, another real problem. According to the investigators at the Pueblo Police Department, on the video that they saw, they could see security officers were talking with Jones for 18 minutes. But after reviewing the footage, the affidavit says that at no point before 6:24 a.m. on the video footage does it appear that Mr. Jones confronted, assaulted, or even threatened anyone. At that point, he had calmed down. But the security officers then again escalated the situation by trying to use force to remove Jones from the hospital property. This is not the police officer statement. This is the statement of security officers. Why when you have a person calm down, when you have the person not threatening you, not being violent, not assaulting you, why would then all of you or any of you then grab a hold of the man and say, that's it, we've had enough, you're leaving the property? Now, more damning than even the security officer statements is the video, because it disputes what security had told them. It disputes the fact that Jones had done anything. Now I have something even more damning, because according to police investigation, one of the security officers, while Jones was on the ground, Anthony Virant, put his hands on Jones's throat area. I don't know if he was choking him, but certainly he wasn't stroking it or trying to do whatever. He obviously was using some level of force. Did it cause Jones to pass out, lose consciousness? We don't know. One security officer at that point had his hands on the throat of Jones, while others laid across Jones' legs. One other security officer attempted to grab the arms of Jones and put them behind his back, while Jones was not struggling. It is also written in the police affidavit and verified on video that a security officer was seen placing his left forearm on the back of Jones' neck. I don't mind, and I completely understand when security officers feel they have to use force of whatever level because they're being assaulted, because they feel there's a threat, they're in imminent danger. But that wasn't the case according not only to the police investigation, but the video. A nurse was seen in the video approaching and then walking away. Betty Weber, an employee, approached and hooked Jones up to a blood pressure monitor at 628. Detective Ryan Torres wrote in his affidavit that he interviewed other employees seen on the video. And although Jones was said to have been insistent on not leaving and did rip the phone out of the wall, or at least the cord, he never struck the security officers prior to being forced to the ground. Two of the security officers arrested are retired sheriff's deputies, and one was a current Department of Corrections officer. This is very alarming, and I would love to see the total video from start to finish, because if it's happened exactly as the investigation has spelled out that it has, and the affidavit and the video confirms all of it, then this was nothing more than murder. And I have to tell you that I see this time and time again. I teach security officers in multiple states, and whenever we're talking about use of force, there's three things that they're told. Obviously, they can only use force to protect themselves or others. They can use deadly force when it's an imminent threat and the person has a weapon or some other physical means to commit a violent and serious offense, assault. And also, security may use force to effect an arrest. It always has to be reasonable and minimal. Centera Health, the hospital in question in Colorado, issued a statement to a local news station. It says that protecting patient and associate privacy is a value deeply rooted in our organization, and as such, and due to privacy laws, we're not able to comment on the circumstances surrounding the death of Mr. Jones. We have and will continue to cooperate with local authorities in this matter. They didn't say, I'm sorry to the family. They didn't acknowledge that security was wrong because that would implicate guilt on their part. So I definitely understand the reason why they would not comment either way. When you are in a combative situation with a suspect and you finally have that person detained, if they're on the ground face down, one of the first things you do is put them in a recovery position on their side. So if they do vomit, they don't choke on their vomit. Put them on the side so they can breathe. For years, police would take a suspect, hog-tie him, cuff him in the back, lay him on the back seat of the patrol car, face down, and when they got to the jail, guess what? They'd either be dead or in cardiac arrest because they couldn't breathe, especially after a fight. The heart's racing, blood's pumping. If the person's under the influence of drugs, that makes it even worse for them. You always put a person in the recovery position. You always sit them up when possible. One of the things I really loved about a police officer I used to work for, with, not for, but with, he would always put the suspect up sitting on the ground after a chase or after a battle, a fight, and he'd always pat him on the shoulder and say, hey, you all right, buddy? You all right? It's over, man. It's over. You're caught, man. Everything's good now. Just take it easy. Chill out. And they, okay, yeah, and no one died. No one couldn't breathe. It was over. This incident in Colorado is just one of many that have occurred with private security that we've heard about, that we've read about, that we personally know of. We have 17 security officers currently in custody or out on bond for murder. That's on trial. That's happened over the last year or two. The majority of those incidents occurred at nightclubs, but not all. Training, education, supervision, common sense, all keys into preventing anything like this from happening. It is just outrageous and ridiculous that this particular situation had 3 law enforcement officers involved, retired and 1 current, and they didn't know enough to step back and not use that level of force. Again, we don't know what's going to happen in trial. They could be found not guilty. Who knows? But standing here with the information and the video information and the security officer's own statements, I have to say things don't look good for them. If you need more training, or you don't understand what the laws are, please contact us, whether you're a member of Private Officer or not, at helpdesk@privateofficer.com. That's going to do it for this episode of the Private Officer Beat Radio. Be safe. Be blessed. Yes. And we'll see you back here on the radio.